I've been thinking a lot about fast fashion recently and what we mean when we say the term fast fashion. Despite the fact that there are set definitions of what fast fashion means according to various different sources on the internet, which, by the way, don't really agree with each other, I think the literal definition of something and the definition created by the internet and society and our culture are two very different things, and both are as important as the other. It seems like this year especially, the internet has really started picking apart how bad the general state of fashion has become and how we as consumers have gotten so used to poor quality clothing being sold to us from the entire fashion industry. I think at one point you could say the term fast fashion and people would know exactly what you were referencing, probably down to the specific brands you were talking about. But for reasons I'm going to go into, I feel like this is no longer the case. I feel like the term fast fashion has become a lot murkier, a lot harder to define, as the general state of the fashion industry has followed the examples of those beginning brands that we still define as fast fashion and that move towards mass-produced cheap quality clothing. As I said, this has been in my mind for a while now. I've been constantly kind of questioning as new examples crop up whether the ideas around fast fashion need to be redefined. And before I started filming this video, I asked my YouTube community if they agreed, if they feel like the term fast fashion still encompasses what it needs to, or whether the parameters of the term might have changed and we might need to revisit the entire understanding. And actually, the majority of people agree that fast fashion as a term might have become a little bit too murky. And a lot of you provided really good insights into this, and I want to go into this discussion a lot more. I want to break down some of your comments, which were amazing insights. So let's get into it. Also, apologies, I'm battling a cold right now, so my voice feels a bit groggy, but before we get into the video, welcome back to this channel. If you're new here, my name's Katie. I talk about sustainable fashion a lot. I also talk about social media culture and overconsumption and just general sustainability. So if that sounds good to you, then subscribe to my channel, listen to my podcast, follow me on socials, and let's get into it. It does feel like social media was a little bit obsessed with fast fashion and the general state of fashion this year. So many examples come to mind, but the one that prompted me to film this video, I guess, was the recent situation with the brand Odd Muse. And I spoke about this a little bit in a recent video talking about influencer brands, so that could be a good one to check out if you're interested in this topic. So like I said in the video, I don't actually know what started this controversy. I believe someone called out Odd Muse and labeled it as fast fashion and gave a couple of examples. And that prompted Amy, as the founder of the brand, to come onto her personal accounts and respond, saying that the brand is not fast fashion. Her argument in that particular video was that she does not engage with the poor working conditions and labour rights abuses often associated with fast fashion brands. She said she works with only one supplier who she has a close relationship with. And like I said in the video, she got a little bit of backlash for that response based on the fact that she only addressed the working conditions of her brand and used that as the example as to why they aren't fast fashion. I saw a video done by Brett Stanaland on this where he broke down whether Odd Muse was sustainable or not, given recent examples, referencing this recent controversy. And I think he really hit the nail on the head when he said, is Odd Muse sustainable? Not quite, but it's not the worst brand. This was what really got me thinking about whether we need to redefine fast fashion and what constitutes fast fashion, because this idea of Odd Muse not being sustainable but being better than other brands is, I think, a common discussion online and something that's quite confusing to a lot of people, me included. It's like, should I support this brand because maybe they're not completely sustainable but they're better than this brand? And that kind of becomes the deciding factor, rather than, is this brand that I want to buy from engaging in fast fashion strategies which go against my principle of supporting fast fashion? I don't know why, maybe it's because I'm looking for it, but I just keep seeing this discussion and these examples cropping up recently. Like I did a TikTok on Molly May's brand Maybe and her Vogue interview where I called out the fact that Molly says she no longer supports fast fashion, but she tagged fast fashion brands like Arket and COS in her recent Instagram posts, and kind of the hypocrisy there. And because of this, I got this comment saying, "Are COS and Arket still considered fast fashion, as they don't seem to produce as many items as the others named and tend to run on traditional seasons?" To which I replied, "Both are under the H&M brand and perpetuate the trend cycle. They have questionable ethics in their supply chain, not the worst, but still fast fashion." I think both of these examples kind of point to this idea in my mind that we've started to associate fast fashion less with a set of principles and definitions of a brand's practices that mean they're engaging in fast fashion behavior. And instead, we define fast fashion as specific brands that come to mind when we say the term. I mean, if I were to say to you fast fashion brands, you probably would picture notable brands like H&M, Zara. I think we've started to believe that fast fashion is just now confined to the worst offenders, to the ones we are most familiar with as being fast fashion, like the poster examples for fast fashion. Which is why, for example, we believe H&M is fast fashion, but you might have misgivings when it comes to COS and Arket because they're not called out as much, because they often aren't used as examples of fast fashion. Maybe because they're higher in price, maybe because they attract a different clientele, maybe because their perception and their marketing is a little bit more refined than H&M. But because they're under the H&M group, they're profiting off the same cheap labor and business practices as H&M. And presumably they also benefit from the profits that H&M as a brand brings in because it all goes under the same parent company. Sure, they may have slower trend cycles and they may be producing slightly less clothing, but they're still participating in the trend cycles and they're still participating in fast production cycles. I'm not saying they're on the same level as H&M, but they're also not in the rankings of sustainable brands, and I'm just not sure where they fall, and I'm not sure, which I guess is the point of the video, where the classification of fast fashion stops and something else begins. The point of this video for me was to look at what constitutes fast fashion and whether that might be a little bit more blurry than we seem to initially think it is. I think we need to dissect the term fast fashion a little bit. We need to look at maybe what makes a brand fast fashion and kind of question that. There were many different results online. I could not get a clear definition that was agreed on by multiple sources. So let's talk about some of the ones that were most commonly thrown up. So what makes a brand fast fashion? Is it a fast trend cycle and overproduction? Well, yes, but doesn't that make luxury fast fashion too? Since I've talked on this channel before about how they often perpetuate and jump on trends like Black Girl Green or the bag charm trend, just as two examples off the top of my head, which is probably not what you would have expected from our idea of a luxury brand. Not to mention the fact that the luxury industry is currently sitting on mountains of unsold stock and very notoriously is known for burning said stock rather than selling it on in more sustainable ways. What else can make a brand fast fashion? I think polyester usage is definitely up there. It's definitely a social perception of fast fashion. But again, that is the large majority of brands today. Like even outside of luxury, like luxury brands, mid-tier brands, which I think is a whole other discussion we need to have about what constitutes mid-tier. Influencer brands, activewear brands, like polyester is the cheapest material for brands to buy and the usage of it has been skyrocketing in recent years. To call a brand fast fashion because it uses lots of polyester would be to call the whole industry fast fashion, which I'm not saying is not the case either. What else makes a fast fashion brand? Is it cheap prices and poor working conditions? Yes, but would you call Arket and COS cheap? Would you call influencer brands that are selling £200 polyester coats cheap? I don't think so. And yet people argue whether they're fast fashion or not. I think fast fashion equaling affordable is definitely no longer the case now, especially when you consider that H&M and Zara, the poster brands for fast fashion, have been putting their prices up because they can't compete with ultra fast fashion brands like Shein and Temu, so they're instead pivoting to a different price point. Bad working conditions as well. I mean, we only have to look at the luxury scandals from this summer where LVMH brands were called out for some very questionable supply chains to know that this isn't limited to the brands we would necessarily call fast fashion either. And finally, is fast fashion just FOMO marketing, pushing us to overconsume? Which obviously links back to that point about the trend cycle and how it seems like almost every brand now is all about jumping on the trend cycle, jumping on TikTok trends, engaging in FOMO marketing with influencers and early access drops and Black Friday deals, because that is what social media has pushed a lot of them to do. Almost the entire industry is built off FOMO marketing at this point. So you can see why, having gone through all of those, I am completely confused about what constitutes a fast fashion brand in 2024, almost 2025 now. It feels like those things that we relied on when fast fashion first came about to define whether a brand was fast fashion or not have now been adopted by the industry at large, like in some way or another. And avoiding the label of fast fashion when you look at it like this is almost impossible for almost every brand we can name. Part of me wonders whether we need to abandon the term fast fashion altogether, or even change the language to say that brands are engaging in fast fashion behavior rather than labeling them as fast fashion, so that it becomes more of a behavior that people can spot rather than a label that only gets applied to certain brands in people's minds. I don't know. Another part of me thinks that in order to define fast fashion, we need to define what the other categories are so that we can see where brands lie. So, for example, what constitutes a luxury brand in today's landscape? Luxury brands have not had a good year this year. They have been under the spotlight for a number of reasons. I've called out multiple luxury brands on my channel alone for poor labor allegations, for overproduction, for joining in the trend cycle, and basically just engaging in behaviors that you wouldn't think luxury brands would be. So I think we should be asking what sets apart a luxury brand from a fast fashion brand in today's landscape, because I think the boundaries are a little bit more blurry than they used to be. So is it ethics that make a luxury brand? Probably not the thing you'd think of immediately, but to me, luxury means better in every aspect. And ethics of the brand is so important, especially when you're paying more. But if you say that in order to be a luxury brand, you have to have sustainable practices, you have to have better ethics than typical fast fashion brands, it would rule out a lot of the brands that we consider as luxury today. Luxury brands that hide behind opaque supply chains and say they have no idea about the goings on when there's a scandal. Brands who don't pay workers, like the Laura Piana scandal. It would, however, rule out calling brands like Zara and H&M luxury, despite the fact that they're trying to creep up their price points and enter into a more pricey structure, because they also don't have ethics. But on the other hand, it wouldn't rule out the fact that Odd Muse could be considered luxury, because by their admission, they have a close and personal relationship with one supplier who is the only supplier for the brand. And yet I still wouldn't call them sustainable in every aspect. For example, their use of polyester is a little bit problematic and goes against certain ethics for me. So it's quite confusing. Is a luxury brand defined by their better materials? I mean, we've touched on this, the fact that a lot of people conflate fast fashion with a whole lot of polyester. But from my call out video on the luxury industry, I spoke about how their use of polyester is also rapidly rising because of how cheap it is and because of how much of it is being produced. And anyway, what does better mean? Does it only mean natural materials? Because for a lot of brands who are trying to market themselves as better than fast fashion, they speak about how they only use high-grade polyester rather than just regular polyester that Shein might. I don't know whether this type of polyester is actually better than the other. I'm not an expert in materials, but high grade or not, it's still polyester. It's still an oil-based fabric that hurts our planet. And to me, that doesn't say luxury. Is luxury the price range? Probably this is what we've most conflated luxury with in the past, right? Having a price tag in the thousands of pounds for a bag. This was one of the most common answers that came up when I Googled, what does luxury fashion mean? or what constitutes a luxury fashion brand, how certain brands would use luxury pricing strategies to create exclusivity, meaning that a lot of people couldn't afford them, so the people that could felt like they were in a club only they could access. And this is just too arbitrary in my mind to be the parameter that sets luxury. I mean, what is expensive in 2024/25? In the age of fast fashion, some consumers think paying more than £20 for a top is expensive. Others would happily pay £200 if it means that the top is good quality. I also don't think that luxury brands can survive the way they used to on exclusivity marketing and scarcity tactics. The luxury fashion market is in decline and brands are struggling. Luxury fashion houses like LVMH paid millions of euros to be the official sponsor for the Olympics because they valued the fact that they would be getting it in front of millions of viewers and exposing their brand to them, which might make them more likely to buy, which suggests that they no longer believe that they can ignore mass appeal in today's markets. There's a couple of other search results that Google thought makes a luxury brand, like a strong brand identity, meaning iconic designs, recognizable motifs, and a well-known name. I think there's definitely some idea here about whether this constitutes luxury or not, but also with dupe culture exploding the way it has, the power behind a luxury logo or a brand motif is waning. TikTok has removed the stigma of having a dupe of a luxury bag that people can tell is not the real thing. Like, there's no longer any power in owning the actual product from the actual brand. And this dupe culture is not just limited to luxury, it's also, mid-tier and even fast fashion brands. People find dupes for H&M and Zara all the time from Shein and Temu. Is it the overall marketing and the perception of sophistication for a brand which makes it luxury? Again, I don't think so. Fast fashion can recreate this really easily. I mean, the quiet luxury trend, which made brands like H&M and Zara emulate this kind of pared back, very workwear focused wardrobe look that was quite common with wealthy people at one point, has now completely ruined any idea that fast fashion can't do sophistication. At least aesthetically, when it comes to quality, it's a little bit murkier. And the marketing of fast fashion brands is well known as being just as good as luxury. I mean, Zara is ridiculed on the internet quite a bit for its editorial campaigns, which don't really sell the clothes, but look a lot more like a luxury brand that's selling a lifestyle or a brand identity. I also think that sophistication and quality being the perception of luxury is no longer true because of how long fast fashion has been around. I mean, the online discourse this year alone about how we can no longer recognize good quality clothing because we're so attuned to polyester now, it's everywhere. And the average consumer can no longer tell quality just by touch, means that we don't really know what to look for. I mean, if the understanding of luxury is good quality, but we can't tell quality, then it's kind of a nil point, right? My final point is whether luxury means creativity and craftsmanship, whether it means having new ideas in the age of replication, and whether it means really focusing on construction of a product would, I think, set you apart from like 90% of the industry at this point. Having a well thought out, well constructed product in the age of fast fashion culture would feel like a luxury, given that so much of fast fashion relies on creating clothing that is not designed to last so that we throw it away and buy more. This would offer the kind of value that to me would be luxury. But obviously you kind of have, again, the caveat that fast fashion brands can create good quality clothing sometimes. I mean, every time I talk about fast fashion, I get responses of people talking about how they've owned their Zara items for 10 years. And therefore it kind of does also boil down to our treatment of the clothing. But there's also notable studies that talk about how the clothing created 10 years ago from Zara is not the same clothing Zara currently has in stores. So the point still kind of stands as well. I kind of want to go through some of your comments from the poll that I did, because I do think there are some really important ideas here that I agree with. One of them Fast fashion has a literal meaning. We just need to start calling some previously prestigious brands fast fashion, since they became exactly that. They are just expensive fast fashion now. Another one, I think what's missing from the discourse is that you could be spending hundreds of pounds and still be buying badly produced fast fashion. You could also spend less money and be buying better quality items. Someone else said, I do think fast fashion has clear meaning, but for some reason, fast fashion equals affordable, which isn't the case. I think they mean that people have now conflated the idea that fast fashion always means it's affordable. I think seeing your guys' responses, I think scripting this video and researching it and, trying to unpack what my sentiments have been over the last few months has convinced me that fast fashion has changed meaning a little bit, or at the very least, society has forgotten what fast fashion is and isn't. But I'm not really sure on the solution to it, to be honest. I mean, I wonder if my point about changing the way we talk about fast fashion as less of a this brand is fast fashion to this brand is engaging in fast fashion behavior would be more clear, would have less room to go into the nuances and potential arguments there. I don't know. I'd love to hear if you guys have thoughts and solutions on where this could kind of go from here. I'm not going to end this video by giving a set clear definition for luxury fashion, mid-tier, fast fashion. I don't know where this is in my mind. But I do think it's important that we start having this discussion about how the original definition for fast fashion maybe doesn't work in today's evolved fashion industry. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that, what you think about this issue, how you potentially think we should be changing our language or behaviors, or calling out brands more. This is something I've kind of been thinking about for a while. I'm not going to stop thinking about it now, so I might revisit it in another podcast. But for now, I think that's all I have to say. So thank you so much for watching. I hope it was an interesting discussion, and I'll speak to you really soon. Have a lovely day. Bye.